Okay, now that or that?
The other one.
That.
Let's check. It just like it looks like a better scene, if you know what I mean. Like the
No,
scene
that's
is better.
cool. That's cool. That suits me, man.
All right. Tell me that's good. Oh, you can't see me.
Not yet, and let's see. Craig, are you there, bud? You disappeared again, man. There we go. Alex, you're great. There we go. That's good.
Cool.
Craig, I can't hear though. Craig, you there, bud?
Can you hear me, bud?
I can hear you now. Yeah, I'm just waiting for your picture.
Oh, I don't know.
It's so funny. We were just talking now, Alex. Like we're like, oh yeah, cool. Our videos are good. Internet connection is good. And then now Craig, we can't see him.
It's almost like as soon as I come on, he like Craig, your video disappears.
Yeah, it's the weirdest thing. And now I can't even like click on that little icon for the video.
Yeah, let me. I'll just call the group back. Sorry about this, Alex. Sorry. Okay. So do you have? So what? It doesn't have like the normal pin. Like how you normally use to.
Yeah, no, it doesn't have any. It only has. It's ridiculous. It doesn't have anything. It doesn't have HDMI, SD ports, anything. It just has this one type of port, which is USB-C, and that's all it has. So everything that you want to connect in, I've got like a million dongles that I have to connect in.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I never thought about it with headphones. I was like, oh yeah, headphones. So.
Oh shit.
Sorry, guys.
No, that's okay. Well, thanks for sorting that out. Good job there, Alex, by the way.
Yeah, that's a lot better. Like, wow, the sound would be great.
Yeah,
Kif, that's freaking great.
Now, what do I need to do in terms of like the voice memo and all the other stuff that I've got to do?
Okay, so that should be the easy part. We never say that's the easy part though, but yeah, because I didn't tell you, Gareth. I tried to phone Alex a second ago, and then we went to voicemail. So I was like,
it's definitely on. It's on like do not disturb, so that should do the trick.
And cool. This is all about you. So you just go like if you want to speak for an hour on one thing, that's fine. Like, literally like that.
I promise I won't do that, but yeah, no, that's fine.
Childhood and growing up and animals and
yeah, cool. No, sounds great. Sounds awesome.
Yeah,
I feel bad that I'm talking about myself for an hour, but
no, that's why reframing this. Get in that mindset.
And,
that was 2 hours.
Yeah, I know.
That time, like that's crazy.
Wow. So sorry, just on the
and
phone.
Guess what? You spoke about yourself for 2 hours.
I know, and I didn't think it was possible.
So.
Woo! Hey, Gareth.
Hey, Craig. How are you, my man?
Yeah, an awesome, man. How's it, David?
Yeah, awesome, buddy. Early one, well, not too early here in London. Just woken up and had a cup of coffee, and now enjoying a chat with you. How about your day?
Oh, it's been pretty good. Swam in some waves today, which when I was a kid, I was very, very scared of big waves, and I was kind of scared of a lot of things actually when I was a kid.
Really?
Yeah, like of the big waves and like things like that, and I was actually scared of aliens for a long time. And I was really shy. I was really shy little child. And how about you? How were you when you were a kid?
That's crazy, man. Well, first of all, I wouldn't expect that of you, because of the way you are now. But I don't know. Like I guess I had phases. You know what I mean? I think I was quite a confident little guy. But at the same time, I was shy in my own right, and I went through, like I said, those phases. Remember, in high school for like a couple of years, I had, as far as I was concerned, like bad acne, right? And it was only like in the low, like on my chin and stuff like that, and I would spend like my breaks just like waiting outside the classroom. You know what I mean? I wouldn't go socialize with my friends because I was just embarrassed about people seeing me.
Wow.
But I don't think that was for too long. It was probably for like about 6 months to a year type of thing. But still, it was like an important age growing up,
Wow.
you know.
Never thought that you would have had that sort of feeling when, that's the thing that we're discussing actually is like sometimes the person you know later on in life has actually come so far. And our guest that we chatted with today, Dr. Alex Hynes, she was actually quite sort of, she took it really hard traveling to different countries and coming back to Australia and then actually integrating with other students. And if you look at her now, she's this really, really successful, vibrant, outgoing, outspoken business lady and a caring veterinarian. And, it's almost quite difficult to imagine her being sort of, or being awkward or being difficult or finding it difficult to integrate. And we found that really interesting. Hey?
Yeah, very interesting. It's I think it's important to just take note and take stock of things that we're all on this journey, like who you are when you're younger, even if you're like a shy, timid introvert, it doesn't necessarily mean that's who you're going to be when you're older, because we are literally on this journey and there's going to be things which change you and help you grow and help you gain confidence and things like that. And I think it's a great story which Alex tells, and how she got over these things too. I really, I do find it quite like like you said, you don't picture people being like that when they're younger because of the way they are now. So it's really important to understand that there are phases in your life and you're gonna change and be somebody different.
Yeah, totally. And she also inspired us in another way. It's just how dedicated she is to her work, but also how much she loves her work. She literally works every Christmas, and she always has, and she always thinks, I'm going to take this time off next year, but then she ends up going back to it because she's got such a passion for what she does. And that's what it comes down to. We were saying as well, it's just like when you love what you do, is it still work? I don't know.
Yeah, I think she words it quite well. She says, this is just part of my life. And it's amazing that she does give up she has given up the last 10 years of her life. Not given up is the complete wrong word, actually. She has dedicated the last 10 years of her festive season to helping animals in emergency cases and saving their lives, but not just helping the animals, helping the owners of those animals to deal with these rather emotional situations and helping them overcome it. And it's also interesting, I guess there's more things than just to helping the animals. It's also that she needs to be there for her staff. She owns the business, or part owns a business with her colleagues, and that's such an important thing to show your staff, that you're dedicated, especially if you want them to be dedicated and motivated to work at the time too. What an amazing lady, and what an interesting, fascinating chat.
Yeah, she's not only a role model to her colleagues and to everyone around her, but also to her daughter. So she's a power mom as well. So, all around awesome person. We really enjoyed this chat. I'm sure you guys will as well. So let's take a moment now to listen to what makes Dr. Alex Hynes ridiculously human.
All right. So here we are. Really, really excited to have Dr. Alex Hynes on the show today. So thanks for coming on today, Alex.
No problem. Thanks for inviting me. It's fantastic to be talking to you guys.
Yeah, we just to put a bit of context into this a little bit. We met actually, I don't know if you remember, we met briefly at I think it was like a Profit Spaces. You gave a talk and you had Yoshi with you, and and we met briefly, and I got to chat to you a little bit, and
spent a little bit. You were quite fascinated with Yoshi. There was lots of Yoshi cuddles going on, and but no, he's pretty cool. He's here somewhere.
I did say that to Gareth. I was like, Yoshi kind of stole the show in a way. He's He's
Yeah.
such an amazing dog. And we're definitely going to chat about him in a little bit as well.
Yeah.
But so thanks so much for coming on. And so yeah, how has your day been?
Yeah, busy day today. Just lots of meetings. I actually, in general, try to keep Mondays fairly free because because I work the big weekend. But we're leading into Christmas at the moment, and so time is running short. And for us, Christmas is the busiest time of the year in the hospital. Our busiest day of the year is actually Boxing Day, and we'll see over 100 emergencies on Boxing Day. So it's really, really important that everything is in place so that as we head into those days that we've got everything exactly running smoothly, because when people come in and they've got their pets in that, crisis situation, it's that, they just need that experience to be so, so good and for everything to go as quickly and as smoothly as possible.
And sorry, you go.
Carry on. No. So the prep on that would be, so it's a lot of like getting everything ready to be able to handle that load, like,
cope with the
running
workload.
through all the systems.
Yeah, so it's making sure that the actual hospital is things like making sure that the inventory is all stocked up, that we've got enough drugs, because obviously everything else shuts down. So making sure that the hospital has all the supplies that we're going to need, and as well as making sure that the staff are all in a good good place as well. That we've covered all those bases, and that even things like the computer system, for example, is running really smoothly. It's amazing how complex it is to have a hospital of this size, and everything that needs to go into that. And if the computers go down, that's everything for us is based on that. And so all our records, all our communication, everything like that relies on a really, really solid tech system.
I can imagine, it must be hands on deck when you have 100 emergencies in a day. I mean, it's, do you have full staff as well? Are people also therefore not working on Christmas Day to prepare for Boxing Day?
Yeah, it's funny. Christmas Day for us is generally, it's busy, but it's not crazy. It's almost like the calm before the storm. I think a lot of people don't bring their pets in necessarily on Christmas Day because they're busy doing other things and with the family, and I think sometimes maybe you've had a few drinks and they sort of see the dog, and maybe the dog's not well, but let's just see how he goes. And then suddenly they wake up on Boxing Day and they're like, actually, the dog is really sick and we need to get in there. And that's so the phones just kind of start ringing about sort of 7, 8 in the morning, and then once the phones start ringing that they're going to start showing up at the doorstep. And so it definitely is all hands on deck. When we're in full swing on those busy days, we'll have 12 vets on staff and around about 30 nurses and 3 or 4 people out in the client care team just taking care of people as they come in. And so probably about half of those patients will get admitted into the hospital, and half of them will be able to manage as outpatients. But it'll be everything from, it's funny, it's almost the perfect storm when you get to that holiday period, because you have, people go to other people's houses with their dogs, and maybe the one dog looks a bit wrong at the other dog, and then, the fight breaks out. That's the sort of thing that can happen. Or they go to the beach, for example. Particularly in Australia, people love the idea of going to the beach after Christmas and spending the day. And as you would know, Craig, gets pretty hot here. And so dogs get excited. Maybe they don't drink enough water, don't get enough shade. And they're a bit like kids. They won't stop when they've had enough. They'll just keep going. And before they know it, suddenly the dog collapses, and then it's, a big rush to get them in. And if their temperature's over 41 degrees or something like that, they're in a really, really bad situation, and bringing them back from a bad heat stroke situation can be extremely intensive.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know, like, people probably don't necessarily always realize, they're lying down, the dog's running around, and they're like, wow, it's hot, but maybe the dog will just go and lie down if it's tired, like you say. That's what I would have thought. And but maybe it doesn't, and then the next thing you know, it's too late. So that's really, really interesting.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah. And all the things that people feed dogs and cats at Christmas. Cats eat the tinsel off the tree, and the dogs eat all sorts of things. We had this dog a couple of years ago, and it was a staffy, and these people it was like a styrofoam Christmas tree with pins in it, and they had like toffees pinned to the styrofoam Christmas tree, and this dog just ate the whole thing, like pins and everything. And so we took this X-ray, and this X-ray was full of, as we found out, 87 pins in this dog's stomach. So we spent Boxing Day a couple of years ago just literally in surgery in theatre picking pins out of this little doggies. Yeah, and it's just like, sure, why would you do that? But that, that's what they do. So it's incredible what kind of situations. But I love it. I really wouldn't be anywhere else during that period. I've worked really right through the holiday, that Christmas holiday, for the last 10 years, really. So my family, the guys, the team that I work with through those days are really, my family. And so sometimes people say, well, surely if you're the boss now and you've been doing it for this long, surely you could take Christmas off. But when it's so intense like that, and we're all kind of shoulder to shoulder and really, getting in there and doing what we can, it's, I feel I couldn't not be there, ask them to be there and me not be there. So I think it does incredible things and all of us, all of the directors are always there right through those really busy days, because I think it just does a lot to help the team just in terms of what they see us do and setting the example, really. So it makes a difference. Yeah,
absolutely. Wow. Sorry, just to step back there, with the dogs like swallowing like things, in this case was those pins. Do dogs have like an extra strong, like, I don't know, like esophagus or stomach or something like that? Because surely it would feel that going down, you know what I mean? Or is it just not recognize the pain?
I just don't think they think about it. I mean, you would think that it would hurt going down, but we've had dogs that have eaten razor blades, like all sorts of. A really common thing that dogs eat is barbecue skewers, because
Oh, wow.
So lots of those. And so, I really don't know what goes through their head sometimes, but there's definitely kind of your typical offenders, and those are the real, staffies are a great example that they'll just eat something and think about it later. Yeah. You do wonder, it's got to hurt, but they do. So
it's enthusiasm for you. I just want to eat those toffees. I don't care.
Yes, exactly. I mean, we used to have a bull terrier, and the thing used to eat everything. Like I remember a Marmite bottle once broke on the ground, and it just licked the whole thing up. Not just the Marmite, the glass, everything.
Wow.
It was just, and I don't even think we took it to the vet. It seemed to be okay. It's crazy.
Yeah.
No, maybe we did. I'm sure we did. No, give my folks some credit.
Best say that. Best say that anyway.
But it is amazing sometimes the stories we hear about what they do get away with. I mean, a lot of the time we intervene, but I've definitely had dogs that have come in with, I don't know, like whole plastic bags hanging out their bum, and it's just like, what, that's gone all the way through? And
way through.
Like, all good. So
I remember seeing one of your clips that you had up, I think it would look like a staffy. I couldn't actually really tell, but like your whole arm or someone's arm is just down the staffy's throat, and this massive steak comes out.
Steak.
And I'm like, wow.
Yeah, like a whole big piece of meat that this dog had just tried to swallow, got stuck, and then whole. And literally, it was a lot of the time when we're getting things out, we'll be using a camera and instruments, in endoscopy. But if they get down into the stomach, obviously you can't reach right down to the stomach. But this was just behind the pharynx, so I was, as Craig said, I was just able to reach my hand in and just dislodge it and then pull it out. It was pretty dramatic, but the dog was fine, and then they walk out, they wake up and off they go, and they do it again tomorrow. They're learn. So.
They're wagging their tails and like, hey, let's go. What are you guys worried about? So for that one with the needles, did you have to literally cut it right open and then just take them out? Wow.
Literally cut into its stomach and open up the stomach and then literally pick them each one out. And the biggest concern is obviously the stomach. It's not just full of the pins, right? There's digested dog food and everything else that you'd find in the stomach. So then you're kind of wading through this soup, trying to there's another one, there's another one. And then at the end of it, you're like, have we got them all? You know, your last thing you want to do is actually like sew this dog up and then take it to X-ray and then X-ray and then realize, oh, we left one behind. So we were like fingers crossed. We went back to X-ray after surgery and there was no more left. But yeah,
Oh, wow.
we counted them all. So 86. So.
Wow. Yeah. And
Alex,
is a
it's-
dog's digestive? Sorry, Craig. Is a dog's digestive system similar to a human's?
Yeah, fairly similar. You know, they're got a mixed diet, so mainly carnivores, like people are, but they do have a mixed diet. So yeah, different from your herbivores like cows, horses, that sort of thing. Fairly similar in terms of you got the small bowel, large bowel, at cecum, which is sort of equivalent to our appendix. Yeah, very similar.
Okay, cool.
And so it's very clear, Alex, that you. No, this is good. I want to get more into these. But it's very clear that you really, really love animals. Obviously, it's not just a job for you, and which is really awesome. I mean, it really is apparent when we chat to you. But where did that all start? Now, you grew up, or you were born in Adelaide, and you moved overseas at a fairly young age, I'd imagine. How old were you when you moved to the UK?
So I moved to England when I was about 9 years old, and so just kind of finishing off primary school, heading into high school a few years later, and my parents just moved around a lot, really, with my dad's work, and they just liked moving around, different places. They were they're really adventurous people, but the animals was always a really big thing in my mum's life, and so anywhere we went, we always had like a whole menagerie of animals that used to, even going from Australia to the UK, I think we took over, 3 dogs and a cat, and they all came over with us. So yeah, but it was, so moved over there when I was about 9 and went to school, boarding school down in Dorset in the southwest of England, and have great memories of growing up down there and my life down there, and then moved back to Australia. That was when we really started to get lots of animals. We had a little hobby farm down in the Southern Highlands of New South Wales, and my mum had always had this dream to be able to milk the cow and have our own fresh milk, and then she'd make cheese, and she just loved to do all that sort of thing. And so I think really it just became a lifestyle. You would get up in the morning, feed the horses and the cows. And I remember one day she used to just come home with animals, and we had I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Babe. It's like about a little pig.
Love Babe.
Yeah, so that was filmed like right close to us in that part of Australia.
Oh, cool.
And at the end of the filming, they didn't know what to do with the sheep, right? Because they'd kind of done what they were there to do, and they were really trained. They, by whistle, and they would line up, and they'd been a lot of time gone into their training. But it was like, what do we do with these sheep? And there was this suggestion that they might just go to the slaughterhouse. And of course, my mum got wind of this because she was friends with the trainer. And the next thing, she just brings home this whole load of sheep, and they just end up in our backyard. And so all the sheep from Babe just lived out their happy life.
How cool is that?
So yeah, it was pretty cool.
And
wow,
whereabouts? Yeah, whereabouts in Dorset were you based? Was it like Bournemouth, Southampton?
Oh, you know your way around there. It was actually up near Beaminster. There's a little village called Netherbury, sort of between Bridport and Beaminster. And my mum's sister lives there. They actually all still live back over there. My mum is back over there now. My sister lives very close to there, and my great aunt and that sort of thing. So yeah, lovely part of the world, just beautiful. And I'm actually hoping to get back over there this year, fingers crossed.
Cool
but
stuff.
yeah, beautiful part of the country.
So
cold for me.
Yeah, it's pretty cold, especially right now, because I'm in London right now, and it's pretty cold. But
oh, is it?
Yeah, it's like -2 or something silly like that. Yeah.
I'm thinking June. June sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Somewhere where it's
especially
when you grow up.
It's not even like winter for you though, so you'll probably need
Yeah.
a jacket and a jersey either way.
Yeah, but it's pretty warm over here at the moment. But I'm definitely not complaining, I guess, when I see your weather.
Yeah, no ways, bud. No ways.
Yeah.
So Alex, as someone that's as a young girl that's moving around, did you find it sort of tough to live in different places or leave Australia as a 9-year-old, or didn't that really like bother you too much at the time?
At the time, when I was leaving Australia, I remember I have memories of being really quite excited about the adventure and going over to the UK and getting to meet my cousins who I'd never met before and the rest of my family.
Yeah.
And I remember being really surrounded with quite excitement. I remember because I'd read all the books, Enid Blyton books about, boarding school and stuff. And so I was like so pumped about going. And then, of course, the reality of it when you go in those first few months was really, I remember writing this letter to my mum saying, please come and get me, and I'm so homesick. And that only lasted for a couple of months, and then I just loved it. And I just, spent most of my schooling in a little boarding school called St Anthony's down in the Dorset area, and just grew to really love it so much that when I came back to Australia, I actually found it quite hard to adapt to the change of going, just the cultural change, I think, of going back to a normal day school in Australia, and a very different culture. And I was very much a fish out of water, really, because I had this very plummy English accent. And so I learned actually to really adapt into different situations. And so I think that the transition back to Australia was harder, but I think what it really has given me is life skills, I think, in terms of being able to talk to different people, to be able to understand people across different cultures, that sort of thing. So I think sometimes I do envy people who have for example, my partner lives where he lives, his school was like a couple of 100 meters down the road where he went to high school, and his family lives in all the suburbs around. And sometimes I think, wow, that would be great. But then I really wouldn't give up my quite nomadic lifestyle as a kid for anything, really. I think when I reflect on it, I think it's really made me who I am. So yeah, it was definitely an interesting childhood.
Yeah, and
being able to adapt to changes on a like just like that in an emergency scenario is very helpful, and just adapting and being dynamic like that. So yeah, that's really cool. And obviously communication, like you do a lot of that, and clearly you've learned to communicate with different people, and that's a big skill to have. So yeah, that's really cool, taking that positive.
I would almost say that the communication side of it is the one of the skills that when we're even looking for new vets to come onto our team, it's almost the key skill that we look for, because the rest of it, the clinical skill and that sort of thing, we can teach fairly easily. The communication and the ability to talk to people is something that's much harder to teach. And I think the difference is when you have your local vet and you build up a relationship with them, and they know you and they know your little dog, and you really get a trust there. What happens in our situation is we don't have any clients as such. Most people that come through our doors only ever come through once, and we never see them again. But they come through those doors in a highly emotional. They're very stressed. They're stressed about their pet, but they're also stressed about how they're going to pay for it, and what's going to happen, and so all this uncertainty, and being able to walk in that room and be able to connect with them, to have a discussion about what needs to be done within 10 minutes. We might be asking them, for example, an animal that say is undergoing that surgery to take the pins out of its stomach. That's a surgery that by the time we come out of theatre, might be sitting around about $4,000 or so. And so, in that space of 10 minutes, we're saying, hey, we're going to take your little dog to surgery, and by the time we come out of theatre, it'll be $4,000 plus post-op care. And that's a huge thing. And if you can't build that rapport and that connection and that communication with them within a really, really short amount of time, then you'll never get a chance to really do the things that you need to do in order to save that pet's life, or maybe it's investigating what's wrong with them or something like that. So communication is just absolutely a key skill in my line of work.
And like in, say, that scenario, what happens if the people go, well, look, we can't actually afford the 4,000? Do your kind of like heartstrings go and you go, well, forget it, we're just going to do it anyway to save the pet's life? Because I can imagine, like, working in the industry, you have a very close relationship with animals, so, and you don't want to see them be hurt or lose their life.
Yeah, and it does get really difficult because in those situations, what we generally try to give them different options. Most of the time, we try to organise some sort of financial option with them so that they have the ability to have that surgery done and paid off over time, for example. Sometimes, depending on what time or what day, there's a charity hospital that's not too far away and they're charity subsidised, so sometimes they're able to do certain procedures at a less expensive rate. They obviously don't have the facilities, but when it comes to saving the lives, then sometimes that they work really, really closely with us in those sort of situations. There are sometimes times where what we have to be careful of is that we don't put people into severe financial hardship by going ahead with something that they're just not in a position to do. And so it does become really difficult in terms of finding a solution for them. And we always will, really the aim of it is to find a solution. So there's certainly some things that can that there's different options for. For example, obviously something like a surgery, it's a bit of a black and white situation. Patient has an intestinal foreign body, it needs a surgery. Sometimes it can be patient's vomiting and we need to investigate why it's vomiting. But the people, the pet owners may say, look, could you just give us some medication to settle it down, give some subcutaneous fluids or something like that, and we'll see how we go over the next 6 hours, and they're happy to nurse at home. And so we'll always try to work out a solution with them. But it is difficult. It is sometimes difficult, and it's hard. If we were able to because we're essentially got this huge staff and a hospital and the ability to function. If somebody walked in with a pet and needed surgery done, for example, and they had difficulty with finance or anything like that, then what we've got to look at is, how do we sort that out with them? How do we find a solution? And most of the time we do manage to. So
yeah, and like, I guess pet insurance obviously plays a big role in this. Do you find that owners are quite responsible and most of them have it, or is it kind of still like a new thing that's sort of just kind of getting traction?
It's getting traction now. When I worked for about 5 years in the UK, and it was much more acceptable over there. People understood the hardship that big vet bills could bring. And so it's interesting coming back to Australia about 10 years ago, pet insurance was almost unheard of, but I've really seen a change now over time because, once upon a time, vet care, say emergency vet care meant your local vet with the phone on his bedside table, and, if you needed something, he would just come into the, little clinic and do what he needed to do. What's happened over time is that people aren't local vets just don't want to have to work around the clock now. And when we have emergency centres like big hospitals like ours, where we have a full team of people, 24 hours a day, right through the night waiting, then we've got to work out, the costs associated with that, I suppose. And so pet insurance becomes much, much more important because the vet bills follow the same line as being high because of the cost and people's demand really for what they want for their pets. Once upon a time, if a pet was sick, a lot of the time people would decide, maybe not to go ahead or maybe to put them down, to be completely honest. Whereas now people will say, what, my dog, I don't know, has cancer. I want to know what options are there for chemotherapy, or what kind of cutting edge surgery can we do, or things like that. We had one dog in particular who I remember had been in a bushfire in northern New South Wales, and he came in and he had burns to, majority of his body, 60-70% of his body. And when he came in, we put him straight into an induced coma and put him in the ICU. And I'd have to say the majority of people at that point would have said, just don't, we don't, just let him go and put him to sleep. But these people were his family were just so adamant they, I wouldn't give up on my child, and I won't give up on GT, and that was and do everything that you can to save him. And so we did, and 6-7 weeks of bandage changes and all that sort of thing. And he walked out of that hospital after that amount of time, and it was incredible. But that's that's a $20,000-$25,000 situation, that most people wouldn't want to go down that road, but it's there if they want to. And so it's really up to people, to the pet owners, what they want to do.
Wow. Jeez, you guys are really dealing with what a charged situation that you got, like you said, with the communication, how charged the scenario is. It's stressful. It's late at night often. You're just dealing with money. It's so many things. It's really, really complicated, I guess. And it must be a real.
Takes its toll. Takes its toll on the vet team for sure. We are very much have to, even when I was talking before about the preparations leading up to Christmas, making sure that everyone has the support that they need in order to make sure that psychologically they can deal with the stresses that they're going to come up against. And those stresses quite often can be very upset, people who are grieving or who are really stressed to anger, and they'll be really, they'll be abused or verbally abused, or and so making sure that we have measures in place that if anything like that, just like it would be in a human emergency hospital or the ambulance service, for example, you put people in that emotionally charged situation and they just react like they wouldn't normally behave. And so we have to make sure that, we look after our team, really.
Wow.
It's almost like you kind of need a security guard in some ways to sort of, in those situations, or like a big strapping vets to sort of control you. Because I can, especially on that Christmas Day and Boxing Day scenario, you must have like guys obviously love to booze and drink, and they probably... The reason their dog's probably in is because they're drunk themselves and have done something they normally wouldn't do, and they come in and they're charged for that reason. So you might, like you said, that communication is so important that you kind of like really need to just soften it as they come in, don't you? And go, okay, cool. It's really important.
Exactly. Just try to focus on what needs to be done and just not escalate the situation, really, and having the tools to be able to do that is something that we teach all of the team, and that's the client care team and the vets, really, anyone who's dealing with the pet owners that come through the door.
So just a quick question on that before we move on. In sort of normal or general practice with human beings, if a person's been abused, or you suspect that someone's been abused, then there's sort of protocols that doctors need to follow. Does that apply with animals?
Well, it does and it doesn't, as in the law is not as protective of animals, unfortunately, as they are of people. Not that, obviously human life is the most precious thing, but certainly if we suspect that an animal has been abused, and we definitely have had those situations before, then we'll contact the RSPCA, and we will, and they will investigate. So they're very good in terms of if we put in something and say, hey guys, we actually think there's a real issue here. The other situation we'll do something like that is if, for example, pet was in a really nasty way, had been hit by a car, had severe injuries. Sometimes people will say, well, I'm just going to take him home. And at the end of the day, that is really tough on particularly the really caring part of our team, which is the nurses, for example, for them to see something like that. They worry that an animal is going to sit at home and suffer. So then we would call the RSPCA and say, hey, can you do a check on these guys? And if necessary, they'll seize the pet and then get it to help. Again, sometimes people just make those decisions in that moment that probably aren't rational. They're not necessarily wanting to do the wrong thing. That because most people, if they have pets, they really are part of their family to different degrees. But it's just that decision they make in that emotional time.
Yeah, wow. Jeez, yeah, animals.
So we're getting heavy
yeah.
here.
Yeah, no. I just want to. Yeah, no. It's good. But okay, let's I guess maybe bring it back a bit more, just in terms of the human element. So to just take it back to your move to the UK, like, and then back to Aussie. They were obviously both at like pivotal ages, you know. So you moved there when you were 9, and then what age was it again? Like say 17 or something back to Aussie.
Yeah, 16 back to Australia. That was the toughest point, I think, when you're a teenager, right? And you're all you want to do is blend in, really.
Yeah.
And you stick out so much. I had some really tough, particularly that first year when I got back. I just, I'd gone from a girls' boarding school to to a co-ed school, and I remember every time a boy would talk to me, I'd be like, I didn't know what to say. So I just remember being so awkward and really unhappy, I think, for that year when the first year that I got back to Australia. I really couldn't find my place, and so at home it was great, because I really sought solace in my horses. I was a real horsey girl growing up, and I just used to love just spending my weekends out. We had a big quarry down the end of our road, and I used to just go ride the horses around the quarry, and that was really what made me happy at that time. And then as I started to get into those last few years of high school, I was pretty determined then that I wanted to be a vet. I knew, but I knew that it would take a lot of hard work and a lot of study. So as I was considering what I was going to do for the final years of school, so for year 11 and 12, I made the decision that I wanted to go back to boarding school, that environment suited me. I got on great with my parents. It wasn't that, but it was just something about that environment and having a lot of structure about my day that I just really thrived in. So I actually ended up going, but I knew that I needed the really good marks to get into vet school as well. So my parents did a fantastic thing. They found an Asian finishing school. So it was in New South Wales, but it was designed for students who were coming over from Asia who wanted to get their HSC, which is the schooling degree, and they are extremely hard studiers. They're so focused. And so they felt that if that was really what I wanted to do, and we agreed to really immerse myself in that environment, that would be my best chance of getting the marks that I wanted to. So that's what I did. So I was one of only 2 Australians in that school.
Wow.
And the rest were all from all over Asia. So Hong Kong, Korea, Indonesia, Japan. And those 2 years were just fantastic for me. I loved it. I loved, again, meeting all those cultures, really getting to know everything about them. And I've got some great friends from those days. And to really just be able to focus on my study, because that was such a priority for me, to be able to do what I wanted to do, which was to become a vet.
Wow, that's such a cool story. That takes a lot of, at that age, that takes a real sort of chunk of guts, I'd say, to go like, I'm going to go in there. I don't really know anyone. It's not like where all my mates are. And because I have this goal, so you'd like had this roadmap for yourself. And part of that was not necessarily an easy part in the beginning. You made friends, obviously, but it couldn't have been easy. And I guess, I guess you were, at the time, you had an affinity for the sciences or that kind of thing, and you loved animals. So I guess it was like a great decision or a good combination for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. A lot of people, when you ask people why they wanted to become a vet, for a lot of people, I certainly know, I was listening to a friend of mine talk the other day, and she was saying how she had seen a dog in a terrible situation, and she, growing up, and she wanted to be able to help that dog, and she wasn't able to, or she didn't have the skills to do that, and that was kind of her catalyst for becoming a vet. For me, I'd already been surrounded by animals, and they're a really important part of my life, but when it came to studies, I just was fascinated with science, and that was really where my strengths were. And so I still do to this day. The medicine of it is what I really love in the job, and the problem solving aspect of it, because a lot of what I do is working out, putting the pieces of a puzzle together. And, when patients come in, it's talking to them, to the owners, and getting an idea what's been going on, and then working out, what could be going on here and getting those answers. And so that really started right back, in childhood, that wanting to find out the answers, and through science, really.
And when you say science, I guess it's quite a big field. What particular did you like about the sciences?
I think it was just the fascination with how things work.
Yeah.
I was probably more, when you hear about people taking apart frogs and learning about them, that to me, or that sort of stuff, was just amazing. How does the body work? How does the digestive system work? All that sort of things it still does. When I think about it, it's like, wow, it's just fascinating. Even on a cellular level,
totally.
How does a cell become? Yeah. So that stuff, if I'm looking through feeds on Facebook, if I love any science thing, I'll be looking into it, and just that thirst for knowledge. And this job really gives me that unique combination of being able to satisfy that part of me while also helping animals, really, and being around them every day, which is very lucky.
Yeah, absolutely. So what sort of advice would you give to youngsters that want to study to be vets, like, in terms of their school subjects they should select?
Yeah, it's really important to do, I definitely see that some students, like high school students, go down the wrong road of subjects. I think you need to do things like biology and physics are pretty important. And so those are probably the key subjects. The other thing, I guess, the bit of advice that I would have for what I do here when I talk to school students, which I do quite regularly now, is they put a lot of pressure on themselves, which I did as well, to be able to get that mark to get straight into vet school. And it's very different now. You can very easily, if you get marks, if you don't get marks to get into vet school, but you get into doing a science degree, for example, or even I have a friend who did a vet tech degree and then transitioned across to vet science. Yes, it makes a longer road, but I think putting that pressure on yourself that I have to get that mark, and if I don't get that very top mark, because it's difficult to do, then that's career path is completely not available to me. And that's just not true. There's a lot of people who will go and do a year of science and then transition into vet science. And I believe that's actually a lot easier pathway. And sometimes that first year when you're going into university is a chance just to get yourself used to it, probably get a bit of, I don't know, wildness out of your system before you actually get into vet school, which is pretty intense. And then you really knuckle down. And the concepts aren't hard in vet school. It's sheer volume of knowledge and that you kind of need to retain and remember and put in place. It's not difficult concepts, most of it. So, I didn't find it that way. But where some stuff in school, maths and stuff, I found much harder. So
I can imagine like studying to be a vet must be, like you said, there's so much to it, because it's not like you're studying to be a doctor and you're just going to be dealing with humans. You're going to be dealing with all different types of animals, I guess you have to need to know everything about them. So that's also why I guess veterinary studies are a long-term thing as well. Isn't it good, like 7 years?
There is so much to learn, and it's interesting. It's some people have, I'm lucky I had a background with a lot of different animals, but a lot of students going to vet school, maybe they just had a family dog. They've never touched a horse before, and suddenly they're expected to go up to a horse, be able to read the body language, which is extremely important. A horse if you don't know horses, then you just like, I don't know, is he going to bite me? And actually the horse may be completely friendly, but you're just not able to read the body language. And so I think the challenge can be huge in terms of having to not only remember all the theory about different animals, but be able to handle all different animals. And we spend a lot of our holidays. So we do when you're at vet school, you spend each semester obviously doing your study and your exams and going to lectures. But part of the criteria is during your holidays, you actually spend your time out on farms. So, out on the cattle properties or the sheep properties, or in a piggery, which I spent one not pleasant summer working in a piggery. Just to
in the summertime as well.
Yeah, I was pretty bad. My mum wouldn't let me in the door until I completely take it off and clean it off. So yeah.
So how do you tell the body language when someone brings their pet snake in to see you?
So funny you should say that. I actually have, and not many people know this about me, but I actually have quite a phobia of snakes. When I was a child, I was feeding the horses and I picked up a thing of hay and a handful of hay, and I picked up a copperhead snake, which is they're quite prevalent in southern New South Wales, very venomous snake, and completely froze. Didn't know, I just remember in that moment feeling like time just stood still and trying to yell for my dad, but not being able to get the words out, and him coming rushing over and then, getting it out of my hands, and that really has stayed with me ever since, and I find it really difficult with snakes. Wow. Generally I'm a lot better than I used to be, and I have friends who have pet snakes, and I try to desensitize myself somewhat, but certainly if a snake comes in for a consultation, that I'm generally not your lady. So but it is you're getting back to your question, Craig, sorry about the body language. Yeah, absolutely. It's a little bit difficult, if someone brings their fish in, which we have had. How are you going to read that body language? Yeah, it's to varying different degrees. But it is a really important part of the job when we're looking at, is avoiding dog bites. Most of the time, the couple of times I've been badly bitten in my career, I knew that the dog was probably going to bite me. And I remember stupidly thinking in my head the last time it happened, which was a Roddy, and I remember thinking, if she goes to bite, I'll be quick enough to get out the way. And of course it happens before you even have realized it, and then they're latched onto your arm. And so it most of the time, I think over the years of being with animals, it almost becomes like 100 different decisions that go through your head that you're not even conscious of what they're doing, how they're sitting, how they're looking at you, that you really start to know, is it friendly, is it not friendly? So yeah, it's a hazard of the job, but it's a really important skill to learn how to read their body language, for sure. And sometimes you still get caught out. Yeah.
Do you sometimes have to go in there with, say, protective clothing? You have something on your arm or something like that? I'm just trying to think of what you might have to do.
I suppose that for aggressive dogs, muzzle is usually the thing, because that's really the weapon. Cats are trickier. Cats have they have a lot of weapons going on there, so they can really inflict way more damage, because if they really go, then you might. You just cop it, then they can be really nasty. They've certainly put them staff in hospital. But we do, my approach is always I like to be able, most of the time they're just stressed and they're distressed. And if we can minimize that as much as possible by giving them some pain relief, which also usually has a sedative action, takes the edge off their anxiety. We try to go in, somewhere where it's quiet, and sometimes even taking them away from a lot of them will be actually protective of their owners, and so taking them away from their situation where they feel like they need to be the protector in that situation will help. So my approach is always, let's try to work with the dog or the cat rather than against them. And there's just sometimes situations where we actually we'll use something like a twilight sedation or something like that, so that they're not even aware of what's going on, and we can get on, do what we need to do, and then they wake up and they're somewhere that's that there's no one bothering them. So we'll usually find a way. But I certainly think there's no point in trying to force a situation when you have a really aggressive pet. That we've certainly had dogs, really, really aggressive dogs, where we've had a lot of trouble and in terms of restraining and things like that. But most of the time we're pretty successful. So I think often owners are more concerned that they're like, are you okay? You're going to be okay, and are you all right? And what are you going to, how are you going to sort this situation? And it's us reassuring them, don't worry, we'll do what we'll get it done. Main thing is that we look after them and sort it out. And that's what people are looking for. They've come to you for help, and so that's all part of the helping process.
Yeah.
And well, just hearing you discuss the stuff, it makes me, and going back to youngsters that are perhaps thinking about studying to be a vet, I would imagine there are a lot of youngsters out there that go, wow, I love animals so much, and I just want to help them. But there's a massive aspect that people or the youngsters probably need to understand, that it's quite difficult a lot of the time. It's long hours. It's not easy. And there's probably a lot of heartache associated, which you'll have to probably learn to disassociate yourself with. So it's not just about, I want to be a vet because I love animals. And that's kind of the people that I know that have wanted to be vets have just kind of been in that scenario. But I could imagine it could be almost really tough for those people.
Yeah. There is the people that really struggle are the people who are not able to leave the work at the door when they go home, things like that. They really carry a lot of the sadness and the emotion with them home. And it is a job that is really, really tough, long hours, absolutely. And can be very emotionally difficult. We deal with death every day. We're euthanizing animals. That's something that, suicide rate in vets is sometimes something like 3 times the average. And I think part of that is what we have to deal with on a daily basis. It's partly because of our familiarity with death and access to, things if you're having a bad day. My close friend who was my former colleague, just had a bad day one day and just, took a bottle of euthanasia solution and went home and drank that bottle, and died. Absolutely. And in a different situation, if we'd been able to talk to her, maybe she would have felt better the next day. But because the access is there, obviously it's controlled. But if you're determined, and we need to be able to access those drugs, then it can happen. So it's a really big problem, and it's something that we are constantly trying to make sure that we are looking after our team, that we're giving them help and counselling wherever possible, that we're trying to minimise the stress on them. But there's no getting away from it. It's a high stress job, and people who you come into it because you do love animals, but the people who are able to be resilient enough to stay in it are the people who are able to either take measures to look after themselves and be able to, like you were saying, Craig, be able to somewhat dissociate yourself from from things when you walk out that door and go home. And it's important because pet owners look to us to be the strong ones, right? So if you went to your doctor and he told you had cancer and then he burst into tears, you'd be like, okay, I kind of need you to be there for me, right? And so it's a similar situation. Sometimes I definitely have had the euthanasia situations where you just feel the emotion really coming up. Maybe you've looked after this pet intensely for, say through a 20-hour shift. And then at the end of that, you're there in a room with a family and they're having to put their pet to sleep. And you feel the tiredness and the emotion just really well up, and you have to be able to control that so that you can be there for them. And then when you go home, you have other people who are there for you. So... Yeah.
It's making me sad just hearing you talk right now.
Don't.
No, it's great. I love it.
But there's a massive chunk, like the vast majority of what you do on the flip side is like just seeing people super happy and animals happy and because they're getting better. So that's obviously the vast majority, I'd imagine.
The rewards of it are just infinite. When you see them come in through the door in a critical state, and then you watch them as they recover, and then they go home, that is really the most rewarding thing you could ever imagine, because you were there for them. It might be 2:00 in the morning, and they come through the door, and all they're looking for is someone to help, and you're the person that is there that can help them and their pet. It's just a feeling. I think it's almost something that I'll never get over. in terms of the difference that I can make. And I almost think, how lucky am I to be able to make that difference in people's lives, for sure.
Yeah, totally. I can imagine that's what makes like waking up, for you, no problem every single day, and dealing with those 16-hour shifts as well, kind of that happiness afterwards.
Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. Every day's different. I never know what's going to walk through those doors. And so that's great, because no 2 days are ever the same. But you got to be prepared that you can handle that, I suppose. But that's where the team really comes into it. And I work with an incredible group of people. I think the level of trust that's between us is really the key to it, that that the nurses that are working there with you, they trust in your decision making. You can trust in their ability to take care of that patient while you see other patients. And then, when we debrief on situations that have gone well or might not have gone well, that we all know that we've all contributed, and we're all very positive in terms of, what can we do differently next time? What did we do great? The team is really the key, I think, in a hospital like ours, for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine. And how do you deal with this 16-hour shift? You know what I mean? Like you have to be alert the whole time. So like, say you're in your 15th hour, and then all of a sudden, 15 and a half, you get this serious case come in. You got to be literally on, top form all the time.
Absolutely.
What do you what do you do to kind of
I do drink a lot of coffee.
Yeah, so
I won't
Insta,
deny. Yeah. No, I'm a healthy person, but I can't deny that coffee plays a part in it. I think you do build up a level of stamina over time.
Human at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, when we get our new little interns through that are just out of vet school, there's no way we would have an expectation that they would be able to do that kind of a shift. So we make sure that but I think as you do it more and more, you build up a certain level of stamina. I think there's also that thing where when you're familiar with what you're doing, so at the level of experience that I have now, it's, your brain is at heightened activity, but because there's a lot of familiarity to what you're doing, your brain's not on full alert all the time. It's because a lot of you're very familiar, and it's kind of a routine for you, even though it's adrenaline and it's high stress and big decision making. It's interesting. Where I was in a situation not too long ago where I suddenly realised what it must be like to be those new graduates coming through was when we started filming for Bondi Vet, and had a film crew there, and I was learning how to talk to the camera and how to sort of create that environment there that they were looking for. And I remember walking out of that shift the most exhausted I had been for so long, even though the caseload wasn't particularly heavy. And I just got that feeling of like, wow, that's what it must feel like to start, because it was like starting a whole job. So
wow. And so just to go back to, like, I just want to find out a little bit more about, say, when you worked on that the pig farm. I can imagine you have some quite cool stories, or like maybe like, I don't know, just slightly gory, or I don't know, just some interesting ones. Like what's not gory, like what are some of the funny ones? Or
big sows in there, and then they, what you're trying to do a lot of the time is make sure that look after the little piglets in there, because the mother will just, this big mother that weighs, I don't know, like a 100 and whatever kilos, and then she'll just decide to sit down, and you'll have these tiny little piglets who'll just be underneath, and you'll be like desperately trying to like put them out of harm's way. So yeah, I've had great experiences. I went out west on a sheep farm, and that was fantastic, because I've never really been way out into those really remote areas of Australia to work on these huge properties where they with the sheep and doing the shearing, and so I really got a taste of what it's like. I think people don't sometimes realise the range of experience that we need to have. Working on a dairy farm, for example, those cold mornings, getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and going and milking the cows, and you really have an appreciation for what the farmers go through, their trials, how difficult it is for them at times. And so that that aspect of the learning was as important as anything, because I really got to see what it's like on the other side of the fence, so that when you do go out to see them, you're not coming from this high and mighty sort of I'm the vet, and you're not understanding really what they're going through. So when you say to them, you need to do this or do that or separate these cows or anything like that, then you really understand the challenges that might involve in terms of how they manage the farm, or what the implications might be if, for example, if they have a nasty disease that goes through their herd, for example, what is the implications for them? So yeah, it was.
I can almost imagine. I can imagine in like the outback or in the bush somewhere is like the farmers and that have to be pretty like sort of knowledgeable themselves, because it's not like you can just go, let me just pop over to the vet.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They're very resourceful and very practical, really, in what they'll do. I mean, sometimes it's a harsh life, and it's harsh for the animals as well. I remember when I was in England and we had sheep, and if they had twins, we would work like crazy to try to make sure those two twins survived. And it's not like that in the Australian outback. If they have twins, one will almost certainly die, and so it's a really harsh reality of survival, and yeah, it's a good learning curve for sure.
And why would one of them almost certainly die? Does the mother just look after one, or what's the reason?
Yeah, it's generally because either there may not be enough food for the two of them, or one of them ends up being left behind when the herd move on, or that sort of thing. That they either fall to prey, things like foxes, or there's just not enough nutrition for them. So quite often one will die and one will survive.
Wow. So you've seen a massive number of different animals coming through your door. Like you said, you have to be prepared for anything. The two of us coming from a place where there's animals like elephants and big things like that. What are some of the interesting ones that you've had come through the doors? Have you had some random little animals, or people bring you stuff that maybe would be sort of random to us?
I alluded to it before, but we literally had this guy bring this fish in, this very valuable ornamental fish, and he brought it in a garbage container full of water. And this fish had a stone, a stone from the bottom of the pond stuck in its mouth.
Wow.
And and it was it was not difficult. It was a matter of really trying to manipulate this stone out of its mouth. But it was wow, I've never really treated a fish before. Yeah, so that was a bit strange. Most of the other stuff, we get a lot of wildlife, obviously, and like you were saying about wildlife in South Africa. In Australia, that means koalas and kangaroos and echidnas. I remember a little baby koala that we had come in that had needed emergency surgery, and that we'd never done surgery on a baby koala before, and we just rallied together. We got the advice of Australia Zoo on the phone. They didn't feel that the baby would survive long enough to get up to Australia Zoo, which is a couple of hours away. So we took this little baby to theatre. She had a twisted intestine, derotated it, and got her into ICU, and then they came and picked her up in the ambulance the next day. And that's, again, one of my really fond memories of how really the difference that we can make in any animal's life. Really, we may not have done it before, but because I think you're very resourceful. Being an emergency vet, you got to think on your feet, and we just thought, well, we know how to do surgery. It can't be too different. Let's go in there and see if we can fix this. So, but yeah, a lot of injured wildlife, which is a little bit sad because a lot fall to traffic and things like that. But I love seeing them. I love being able to help any of the wildlife that comes through, whether that be echidnas or koalas or whatever. So and for example,
that little koala survived, obviously, and it's in a zoo somewhere now. And
yeah, well, it survived and was transported. It did have ongoing issues with its little gut system. Koalas have got a very delicate gut, and so that was, it was definitely. I had heard that it was an ongoing issue for that little one, And because it was raised as a foster, so its mother had been killed, it had been raised as an orphan. And so raising him in that artificial situation is always really challenging. But this foster mother was, these incredible people that we have, that we call them in the middle of the night and say, we've got a baby possum. And they will just get in their car and drive down and pick up this baby animal and take it home and look after it and feed it every 2 hours. And, people think that we do a great job, but I just have so much admiration for people who foster baby animals, because it's heartbreaking, if they don't survive and they become so attached to them. And, I think it's sometimes more than having a human baby. They require so much care and attention. So, we have an incredible network of carers.
And
That's
how
so cool.
how often do you get to see animals again after you've treated them? Is it, do you ever get to see them again?
Interesting. That's a really good question, Gareth, because it's something that when people come into emergency, they struggle with that aspect of it, because again, when you're in a general practice, for example, you build up a relationship with a pet, they become sick, they get better, you see the outcome. In emergency, it's not dissimilar to an emergency department of a hospital, where patients come in, they're treated, and then if they to stay in hospital, they'll generally move to a different department. And that for us may be, they may go to cardiology, or they may go to the internal medicine, or into ICU, for example, and or back to their regular vet, back to their local vet. And so majority of the time, no, we don't necessarily find out the outcome past that sort of 48-hour mark, or whatever it is that they stay with us. And that can be difficult for people, because they really want to know, what happened, what was the outcome, was what I did the right thing to do, or learning from their experience. And it's something that I have a very kind of philosophical approach to it, which is these patients come in, and if they're my job is to help them, and if they're in a better state once I've helped them, then when they came in, then that's my job. And then there'll be other people who will look after them from there. So I definitely have patients that I still keep in contact with, that have, give me updates and things like that. But if I tried to do that with most of the patients that come through, I'd never be able to focus on the ones that I need to look after at this point in time. So I generally trust in other people to follow that through.
Yeah, I'm sure. And do you ever get, say, the odd card that sort of comes to reception saying, "Oh, thanks so much for what you did. Our dog is all fine now," and stuff like that?
Yeah, yes, I do, and I love that. It's not why I do it, but I think sometimes when people do stop and give recognition, I think for myself it's great, but also for any vet that does this really tough work, to have that some appreciation helps a lot when you do have those tough days, and to be able to know that they really did see the great things that you did. So I think that's people always would like that that appreciation, I suppose. So it's usually chocolates, which gets shared around. So
I think at the end of the day, like you say, we are all human, and there's something very satisfying and gratifying to be able to help and give back, and to also then hear that from someone. On some level, it's always going to be really, really awesome. But just chatting about that, you're obviously now in a position where, like you said earlier, that you're in a sort of you're one of the directors of the clinic, or the hospital. And what sort of role are you playing now? Are you still operating regularly, or is it just occasionally? What is the split at the moment for you?
I do spend probably about 50-50 of my time now on the hospital floor. It's because I love to work with the patients, and I love to teach as well. And so a lot of what I do, I tend to spend a lot of my weekend time on the floor with teaching the junior vets coming through, and also looking after the cases and doing the surgeries and things like that. And I love the aspect of it. But also, yeah, as you say, as a director now, I'm much more involved with the direction of how we want to grow the hospitals. We have 5 hospitals across Australia now, and my dream is that every pet within a major city in Australia would have access to an emergency centre of this sort of calibre, so that pets could really get the care that they need any time of the day or night. And so yeah, part of what I do is looking at how we can make that available to pets right around the country. And also just the general day-to-day management of a business, because at the end of the day, it's a business like any other. And so just making sure all that everything's running smoothly is yeah. So I tend to have a fair few hats in what I do, and I love the clinical work, but I also love being involved with the the running of it as well.
I'd like to go a bit more into the business side in a second, but I just want to, if you can just paint the picture for me, because I'm trying to picture what a veterinary emergency hospital looks like, because I'm just thinking ER, you know what I mean, type of thing, as in like the TV show. But like how big is it? Because it sounds like, you said you have different departments like ICU, blah blah blah, etc. What how big is it? How many rooms do you have? Help explain.
Yeah, paint the picture for sure.
Please.
It is huge. It's one of the biggest in area, the biggest multidisciplinary specialist hospitals in the country, and it's not that different to something like a human hospital. And so we have like 11 consulting rooms, and most of those will be in operation majority of the time. We do have an ICU. There's a big treatment area out the back, which is where we triage patients. And then we have various departments like an isolation ward where we deal with any infectious diseases. There's there's a lot of, it's like a big maze. It's size-wise, it is, about 1,000 square metres in area and several levels. So it's a huge hospital. In fact, it's the one that I work at, which is the one in Underwood, is the biggest. And when we then design the other hospitals, we actually have designed, and we've learnt from things that we did at Underwood. In some ways, Underwood is too big a hospital. It's like a 500-metre sprint to get from the front of the hospital back to the treatment area. So, if we have a critical patient in a car, it's a long way to get it from the front of the building back to where they need to be. Wow. So when we've designed the subsequent hospitals, we've designed them very differently so that we have a much more compact design, and we don't have these huge spaces around getting from the front of the hospital to the back of the hospital, because partly because of the patients in that sort of situation, as I was saying, but also because when it is 2:00 in the morning, if you have a reception that's very close to the main part of the hospital, you could have a nurse that's, say, covering the front desk in case someone rings the bell, but also helping out the back if it's quiet. When you have a huge hospital like we have to have whole different teams to function in those different areas, because if you have a nurse, it's so far away out to the front of the hospital that they can't possibly kind of work between the two. So from a pure staffing point of view and cost point of view, we've certainly learnt from this hospital to design other hospitals. And I think that's just the journey of any business, really, isn't it? That you learn from the things that you did really well, the things that you would do differently next time. And that's certainly been our experience.
Jeez. I've always thought hospitals and like airports and things are sort of similar in many ways in terms of the flow of things. Like it's logistically just incredible. Do you guys have then, like, sort of, as you would in another business, like a manager which will do some training in terms of just the workflow of like how everything works? It's just to try and get things streamlined. It must be really complicated, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it's very, very protocolized. So everything, even when new team members, particularly new vets, for example, come in, we don't just expect them just to like hit the, hey, here's your first shift on the roster and off you go. They'll actually spend 6 weeks minimum, sometimes even up to 6 months, just depending on their level of experience. But certainly the key in those first 6 weeks is actually to get them familiar with the logistics of the hospital. So they'll shadow one of the senior clinicians, and they might be a vet with several years experience, but they will literally become so familiar with how each process works. Even something like a euthanasia, for example, it's so important that every single pet owner that comes through has a consistent experience in that situation, because that is such an important moment in their life that we need to get it right. And so the reception, knowing who to call out the back to make sure that pet is ready for the owners to come through, and that the vet is aware, and how does it then work even we know afterwards. Jeez. There's so many protocols that are involved, and so refining that is something that we've done over time. I think we do that extremely well, but we certainly don't expect anyone coming on board to just be able to jump in the deep end, and it wouldn't do our business well if that was the case. So we really invest a lot in the training of the vet team, the client care team particularly, because they're really on the front line. They all our client care team have skills in triage, so they're able to triage patients as they come through. And, even our nurses are very skilled in terms of their ability to be able to assess patients quickly, because sometimes there's not even always a vet there. And they have to be able to make an assessment as whether they've got to go find someone to look at a patient, or whether that patient can wait for another 5 minutes until there's a vet available. So lots and lots of training. But that really is where we'd love to be able to set ourselves as apart. And we get calls from all over Australia for advice from people in clinics in remote Queensland, for example, who might be a new graduate in a little clinic in the middle of Cloncurry or somewhere remote like that. They're on their own. They've got nobody to talk to, nobody to help them, and we're really a source of advice. And it's wonderful to hear their really their relief in their voice. That you pick up that phone and say, hey, it's Alex here, and I hear you've got a tricky case, and talk me through it, and let's see if we can work out what's going on. And also being able to understand that they don't have the fancy ultrasounds or the fancy blood machines that we might have. They have very basic equipment, but there's still a lot that they can do in that situation. And so we mentor them through that. And I love the aspect of what we do, because then we're not only giving to the pet owners out there, but also able to give to just the rest of the profession in terms of support. Because that's what I wanted when I graduated. In my first job, it was me and my boss, and he just gave me the phone and said, here you go, and then took off for a week, and there I was,
Wow.
petrified, and had this phone. And I remember one night, I had to go out and do a cesarean on a cow. I'd never done a cesarean before, and I was just kind of hoping that I was doing the right thing, and and the farmers there watching me cut the calf out, and then going home, and I remember shaking, but I'd done it, and it was all gone well. And then 2 hours later, another phone call comes in. I go out and deal with a sheep with pregnancy toxemia, and then before you know it's morning, and I got to start my normal day again. And so it was intense, and I just remember feeling like I wish there was someone that I could have called that could have helped me with some of those cases that I saw. And, I always wanted to be able to provide that level of support for others in other vets in the profession. And so now I really feel we're able to do that, which is fantastic.
Yeah, wow, that's so fast. I mean, geez, you guys run obviously such a slick operation there. I mean, it's really fascinating listening to it. Is there any sort of crossover with, like, say, human hospitals? Do you guys speak to each other, and do you go, oh yeah, this is what we do, this is what they do? Is there anything like that? Or
we do actually, particularly our specialists. So we have a resident in training at the moment to be a specialist this year. She's spending a lot of her time in a human hospital learning from them. This is in our critical care, more in the ICU, but learning from their ICU techniques that they use on ICU patients, and then translating that into what we can do for pets, particularly in areas like ventilation, for example. That's when we will actually go over to the States and teach the vets over there about ventilation. We have tick paralysis here in Australia, which is huge and causes severe paralysis in dogs and cats in particular. And some of these animals will go onto life support and will be on a respirator to breathe for them for several days. Wow. Until the paralysis wears off. And so we're very, very used to doing a lot of what we call ventilator medicine. And so learning from techniques from human ICUs, but how they manage patients on life support helps us with our skill set. But because we have, thousands of patients with tick paralysis every year, then and in the States they don't see as many because they generally will ventilate different sorts of diseases, then we're able to, again, share our knowledge with them in terms of, what works and what doesn't. And even the variability in patient sizes. You might get a 2 kilo Chihuahua versus like a 60 kilo big dog. And then how do you, what's the best way to approach a completely different animal? So there's some crossover on a day-to-day level. I know, and I'm thinking of a time recently where we had a dog that was bitten by a death adder, and we don't carry death adder antivenom in our hospital because it's pretty unusual envenomation. And so we contacted the local hospital to see if we could have a vial of their antivenom, and they were extremely helpful in terms of helping us with supplying antivenom. So they are in general they are pretty good. And happy to help us out in those kind of situations. So,
jeez, it's so amazing that I guess your systems, your protocols, because you're such a busy clinic, are tested all the time. Because when you're at capacity or pushing that capacity limit, that's when you're forming, and that's when you learn. So I guess. You guys must be teaching, really leading the way in terms of a lot of that stuff, because there aren't people with that kind of volume, and that's where you'll really learn that stuff, a lot of it. So I can totally understand that you'd be passing that knowledge on to lots of other clinics around the world probably at some stage, because there aren't that, I would imagine, not that many big clinics like that around.
Yeah. I love to think that we're really pushing the boundaries of what's possible in veterinary medicine, because it's just essential to, really in many professions. But if you think of how advances come around to be in medicine, for example, it's by people saying, look, I don't know if this is possible, but let's give it a go because let's see if this can make a difference. And so that's where I see we fit in the veterinary world, is we are pushing the boundaries a lot of the time as to what's possible. Because that's what people really demand. I mean, pets are part of their innermost family in a lot of cases, and so they want absolutely what they would want for their children, for example. So if they say let's give it a go, then we will find a way.
You'll do it.
Yeah.
And Alex, they talk about, say, like in technology now, the advancement is so quick, in terms of the changes we're seeing. And then I think medicine, they're saying it's even quicker than technology. Is it the same in veterinary medicine? Is it also really progressing a hell of a lot?
Yeah, very much so. I don't think quite the rate of that medicine is, because there's not the, if we talk about the amount of millions of dollars that's spent in medicine, it would be so much of a smaller scale in veterinary medicine, for example. But things like coming up with new vaccines and coming up with new drugs, for example. Talking about tick paralysis before, in the last 2 years, there's been a very, very effective tick prevention medication that's been developed by a drug company that is just changing overnight, really, from season to season, certainly the amount of tick cases that we see. And so, I would love a day when one day we eradicate tick paralysis altogether, potentially, would be fantastic. When I think about from a technology point of view, I think a lot of the monitoring now is very much, a lot of the anaesthetics are very much on par with the medical field. When I was talking about ventilation before, all of that equipment, those machines are all developed for humans and adapted for animals. And so, yeah, it's always evolving, and really want to stay on the cutting edge of that for sure.
And so, you don't have to answer this question if you don't want to, but it's just quite interesting. So you obviously, like, you've seen a lot of this stuff, like in the front line when it comes to, say, working on farms and stuff. Like, mega farms these days, are quite, I guess, sad places for livestock. Do you, like, is this something that you kind of just dislike completely? Or do you also, are you like a vegetarian, or are you an omnivore still? How do these things, say, impact you, because you see them all the time and you know a lot more about them than the day-to-day person?
Yeah, absolutely. To answer one of your questions, no, I'm not a vegetarian, but many vets are vegetarian, or vegan because of what they experience and what they see. And yeah, I would totally agree with you that there's some horrific conditions that animals are kept in, and particularly in pursuit of the most economical way to derive the products. And particularly, in Australia, there's some degree of control over it. But when you look at where a lot of our sources come from, which is overseas, where there's very little control or very little, welfare standards, really, it's quite horrific when you see some of the conditions that animals are kept in. It's just it's horrible. Yeah, for sure. I think that it's particularly I think of countries that are even close to Australia, where we source a lot of our things, meat products from, for example. Animals are kept in horrible conditions. Yeah.
And do those big places, do they generally have like a vet to give them advice, or do they have sort of?
They do. They are required to. And there's big intensive grain-fed cattle properties that are in Australia actually, and they'll have a vet on staff. But a lot of the time, that vet's role is to really things like antibiotics and vaccines and things like that. It's a very different conversation from welfare. So that that's a whole different. They're there for a different purpose, really. So
cool. Yeah. And just to kind of sort of change paths a little bit as well, move on to, I guess, the more human element side of things again. You have to deal with a stressful environment day in, day out. How do you deal with it? I know that you love your exercise. You also have a young family. So you just want to give us a bit more about that?
Yeah. Exercise for me is really my recharging time. It's funny, today is the start of the week after the weekend. And the first thing I'll do is get up and go for a run in the morning, no matter how I feel, or, sometimes kind of dragging myself around a little bit. But it makes a huge difference in almost resetting my body clock somewhat, and also just resetting my mind as well. And even when I've been through some really dark times, both in terms of my professional life, and also my personal life in terms of getting divorced and so forth, exercise for me has always been a real way of just being able to rebalance things. And yeah, I love it. And it's not for it's not for everyone. Some people take up some other sort of hobby or whatever, but for me it is, particularly running, I suppose. I love that idea of just being in the zone, out on my own. I spend all day with people. It's funny, you're a vet and you see and obviously deal with animals, but it's really all about the people. And there's people to talk to, and a lot of human emotions. And there's a lot of, in my job, there's just a lot of decisions to be made. And I think sometimes at the end of the day, I really do get decision fatigue. I've made all the decisions I can make today, and the rest will just have to wait till tomorrow. But I love going for a run, putting my headset on and just pounding the streets. I did the Kokoda Challenge 6 months ago, which was a 96-kilometre adventure race.
Wow.
And it was funny because my business partner, Rob, sent me this text message and said, I wasn't doing a lot of running for a while there, and he sent me a text and said, I'm looking for someone with a strong mental state who who would be keen to do this race, and I was like, yep, I'll do it. So I knew that he was probing to see if I would take the bait, and I absolutely did. And it was a fantastic chance just to learn what it takes mentally to push yourself through an extreme pain barrier. I was with 3 very, very fit guys. My partner was one of them, and so I was the only girl in the team, and so I knew it was always going to be a challenge for me to be able to keep up with the pace. And we put in 6 months of really solid training. Sometimes the only time that we had to train was in the middle of the night, and we would leave at maybe 10 or 11 at night and get back at 2 o'clock in the morning. Wow. But all of that was very valuable in terms of just learning to run through the night in those conditions, when you're tired, when you're hungry, when you just don't want to go. And there was a few times where my partner Gerardo would say, right, we've got to go out for a run. And I would just be, I'd be almost in tears saying, I just don't want to, I don't want to go out that door for 4 hours and run. And he would just say, put your shoes on, and off we would go. So he was fantastic in just really making sure that we got the training done. And we got through the race. We had a goal of 20 hours that we wanted to do it in. And we did it in 19 hours, 48 minutes. And wow. It was, an incredible achievement. So things like that, I love the idea of physical challenges that you push yourself. It's not only physically, but it's mentally how far you can push yourself in those hours. And I think that makes me a better person and a better vet, and having that balance with my exercise is something that I think makes up who I am, really. So
that's really incredible.
Yeah, I can imagine it's like it really goes well with what you actually do, because you need physical strength because you're on your feet a lot of the time with your job, but then you need the mental strength to deal with all the pressure situations. So training for a race like that definitely helps. I mean, the mental strength that you learn from going for runs at 11 o'clock at night when you really, really don't feel like it is something like you can't explain to somebody the lessons that you learn from doing it unless you've done it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it was really good. I think the only other thing that really takes me to, other than running, that takes me to that mentally free space is scuba diving, which I love. And when you go underwater, do you guys scuba dive?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's so quiet. There's no noise, and I love that silence. And again, just it's a whole different animal kingdom that you never get a chance to experience really any other way. And I feel privileged when I'm down there and being part of that, and just silently, going past. And whenever we plan a holiday, I'm always looking where could I go diving? So maybe South Africa will be next. They would have diving on. Yeah.
So didn't you?
Yeah. So, but I love it.
So you're obviously being someone that dives. You're pretty obviously in touch. You got your finger on the pulse of like the state of the ocean and that kind of thing. And I've heard like quite a few things about the reef and specifically the Great Barrier Reef, and that are some of the stories true that it's sort of in a bit of a dire place?
Absolutely. Or? Yeah. And it's something that can, is really should be the concern of, well, certainly every Australian, but really every person around the world. Is this unique wonder of the world that we have on our doorstep, and slowly it's being destroyed, as we impact on the coral and so forth, and really on the whole biosystem. And I feel privileged that I get to experience the reef, but I worry that my children and my grandchildren won't have that experience. And I think it definitely can be explored in a sustainable way, but it's not always. And there's certainly elements out there just in terms of pollution of the oceans and things like that, things that are difficult to control necessarily from this side of the world that are impacting on all of that. And it's just such a tragedy, and something that saddens me hugely.
So it's essentially a global problem. It's not just
absolutely
that little local area. Obviously, it's something we all need to work together with. Wow.
Yeah, for sure.
And what do you think, like on an individual level, we can all do is I mean, I know every little thing counts, but it's really the big guys that I guess are doing a lot of the damage.
Absolutely, the oil, around the world. I mean, it's that thing of how can you possibly impact on those big power players around the world that make those economic decisions. But I think just increasing awareness is really the key, and every little voice helps in terms of, that's how eventually we'll get through to them, because that's, that history tells us that you just have to keep your voice loud and stand firm, and that, that's the way to make change, even if it feels like it's ineffective at the moment. It just takes our individual voices to make, pull together as one big voice, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that just comes back to, we all want to live in a better place, but also we can't just think of the short term. We typically as human beings, we love to think for the next few months and weeks, and we just can't think like that. And it's really cool that people like yourself who people look up to, you discuss those things and sort of make a little bit of an awareness, even if it's just in your circle of influence. It makes a difference. But you're also involved with a few other things that in giving back, as if you don't give back enough already. You're also involved with a charity in Nepal. Could you give us a little bit of info on like how that works and how you got into that and why you do that?
Yeah, it was actually it was something that Gerardo, my partner, it's really from him that it all came about. And I've just really been inspired by what he's really trying to achieve, and now become part of that process as well, which has been fantastic because I've learned so much. I've never been to, so the charity is Rebuild Hope Nepal, and it really what we're aiming to do, well, certainly at the moment what we want to do is rebuild a school in Nepal that was devastated by the earthquakes several years ago. The school is such an important part of these villages in the remote parts of Nepal. The little school that we're rebuilding is in the Sotang region, which is just at the base of Everest, and it's at the moment they have a temporary structure, and you can imagine the elements. They've just got a roof over their heads, but then the elements, how can a child learn when they're sitting there in sub-zero temperatures? And so what we really want to do is to be able to provide them with a proper structure that they can learn in, and that will then, if we can empower them to educate their children in a proper environment, then obviously that then has a flow on to all the villages as well. So Gerardo's been over to Nepal several times, and really was just absolutely fell in love with the generosity and the simple life of the people. We worry about getting the latest iPhone. That they just think about the essentials of life, like a roof over their head, and how to have their children learning and things like that. It's just so simple, and yet they're such a beautiful, happy nation of people. And so there's a just incredible amount of gratitude for life itself. And so so he was really inspired to then be able to, because he saw that they just don't have the government funding to rebuild a lot of these structures that were destroyed in the earthquakes, and so that's just not done. Which would be, if that happened in a country like America or even Australia, it would be outrage. We would have an expectation that the government would rebuild these essential buildings, and it just doesn't happen over there. There's a degree of corruption within the government. Even as we've raised about $20,000 now Australian in order to rebuild this school, and we've had a few setbacks along the way. And it's interesting. You think you have all the best intentions, so how could this not go right? Yeah. And yet we have come up against some. We had a school designed, and then at the last minute the government knocked back the design of the building, and that was just such. We felt so disheartened after that, and so we didn't do anything for about a month, and then we we're like, we can't give up on this. And particularly everyone who's so generously given the funds to the charity, we were just like, we've got to do this. And so we went back to the drawing board, redesigned the school, resubmitted it. Again, you've got to pay this department and that department of the government. And as I said, there's a big degree of corruption over there. But at the end of the day, what we want to achieve is to be able to rebuild this school with 4 classrooms would be what we're aiming for. And then really when we started looking at that, we thought, well, why stop there? Why not look at the other aspects of that they don't have of basic structures? For example, the nearest healthcare facility. This isn't, even a hospital. This is just somewhere where there's, a doctor. For this particular village is like a day and a half walk away. So if you have a woman that's in labour, for example, and gets into trouble, she really has no chance of medical help or survival. So there's a huge amount, and these women are married very, very young, and so there's a huge amount of death in childbirth. And so if we were able to put some facilities in place, again in this village, to be able to provide healthcare, particularly for women, that and it's funny, you have an idea and then it grows and you want to do more and more, and that's certainly been my experience. And we're dreaming big, but small steps along the way. So really the plan is to get this school finished. That's our plan for this year, and then we want to look at what else can we do to help. So, but as I say, I actually haven't been over there. I would love to get over there this year. It's funny, people say, are you going to go over and rebuild the school yourself? And that we certainly have a lot of people within the charity who were very keen to do that. But what you need to understand is that the actual building process, the people there rely on that for a job. So we want to provide them with the tools and the materials to build it, but then we leave it to the local people to actually be the ones. We might help a little bit, but really it's for them to build it.
I really love that. Like, what I really love about that, obviously there's so many things that are awesome, but it's just like we can make a difference. And that seems like a massive insurmountable thing over there, but we can start somewhere and just do something, Exactly. And that's what you guys are doing right now.
This is one village. One village.
Why that village? Why there? Yeah. But why not as well? Just start there.
Yeah, exactly. Why not? This village is, it needs a school, and we just thought this is where we start, and this is where we start. But where will we end? Who knows? I'd love to think that it will get bigger and better. So, yeah, that's the sort of dream that I want to be able to achieve. I want to be able to look back on my life and see 100%. That I've made such a difference. And it's funny, people actually say to me, well, why aren't you helping an animal charity? Because you're a vet. And just because you're a vet doesn't mean that you can't, you can't have the desire to want to help humanity as well. Yeah. And so, I'd like to think in my day-to-day work, sure, I help animals, but imagine if I can also have an impact on humanity as well.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's such an awesome initiative. You obviously have such a massive heart, which is really great. We have a friend of ours who actually was on the podcast recently, and he was in Nepal when the earthquake happened. Oh, and wow. He tells us the story on the actual podcast of like the earth shaking and roofs falling off buildings and things like that. And it was quite I guess an emotional and difficult time for him. And he helped a lot afterwards rebuild a lot of places. Just off his own back, he got friends on Facebook. They created a group. They started raising money. So we know exactly what you guys are doing, and it's awesome. And we'll put you in touch as well, just so you know. And then at the end of the show, we'll also get the details so people can help out in whatever way they can.
Fantastic.
But Alex, just listening to everything you do. You really you sound like Superwoman. You have but honestly, you have so much going on. Literally, between working, between exercising, having a family, doing the fundraising, the volunteering, all these sort of things. Like, how do you keep atop of everything? How do you keep afloat? You know, like, time management must be a big one. You must have a real good, like, I guess, support network. You know, how do you do it?
Yeah, I am very lucky that I've got a great support network. It's funny when people say about, you know, what about work-life balance, and particularly because I work a lot of weekends and things like that. But, you know, to me, it's all life. It's all part of who you are and what you do. And yeah, there's definitely. I also think in terms of having a balance, it's not a static situation. You are constantly trying to make sure that you know, you never feel like you have got under control. I mean, people might look at me and think, wow, how does she do it? Or, well, there's still things in my day I don't do. There's still days where I feel like I should have achieved more and I haven't. And so I think this nirvana that we have of, wow, you know, being able to achieve it all is just not the reality. I definitely have days where it's tough and you know, I don't get done what I want to get done, and I definitely have days where I just decide, you know what, I'm just going to do something for me today, or say for, you know, me and my daughter, we're just going to go and do something fun for the day today, and I'm going to worry about these things that are piling up that need to be done, and the phone ringing and the hundreds of emails coming through, because you know what, they're going to be there tomorrow. And so I think it's a matter of just being able to switch off. I think if you have that ability to switch off, it doesn't matter how much you've got going on. You can bring that balance around, because you just learn that when you're on, you're on. When you're off, you're off, and that's really how I approach it. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. It's always hard, isn't it? People do ask how do you do so much. Someone described me the other day, actually, and I think it's quite true, is that I'm just the eternal optimist. I think I always, you know, there's an idea or a plan, and I'm that first person who's just like, yeah, let's get in and do it, without possibly sometimes thinking things through very well, because I get caught up in you know, the big dream, the picture of it, and really I think that's what's helped me really be the visionary for the company, really. But then sometimes when we start getting into the detail of what it's going to take to get there, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that stuff. Someone else can help me with that stuff. But it's one of the things where it's like, say yes and work out how you're going to do it later. That's really how I would sum it up.
Yeah.
You don't need to be the detail person as well. You're already doing enough there. So.
Yeah, and I do have some fantastic people with me, the other directors at the hospital. My partner, Gerardo, is just an extraordinary human being. I think it's a huge challenge. He's my business partner, and obviously he's my life partner as well. And how do you not talk about work 24 hours a day, or how do you not allow that to encroach on? And we definitely face challenges in terms of making sure that we have time where we're not talking about work. But he's that person who will not only support me, but also sometimes kind of snap me out of it when I'm maybe having a bad day, or things haven't gone so well on a shift, for example, and I'm wondering if I could have done something different. It's just such a great feeling to have someone there who, I described it the other day on a post actually that I put on social media, but he'll kind of pep talk me off the ledge, if you like, and say, and we'll talk through it, and you think, actually, yeah, I did do a great job. So I really do attribute a lot of my support to him. He's really, my key.
Yeah,
but I think a lot of people might say, like, it's really tough, and you work together and you live together, but that's also a real fundamental, deeper understanding of one another and what you actually have to go through on a day-to-day basis. So I consider it as a real positive thing. Like you said, like, he totally gets it as well,
He totally gets what it takes to do what I do, and it would be very hard for someone else, maybe, another person maybe, to look at it and go, why do you choose this? Why do you choose this road? But he gets it. He really does. So yeah, that's a very good way of putting it.
Yeah, and so I know it's late for you, and we've had you on the on the call for a while now. Just before we kind of wrap things up, I can imagine like a lot of your life is actually in the public eye now. With obviously what you do, in your own community. You also have a decent amount of, like, say, people that follow you on all the different social media platforms. I'm sure that you must have, like, ladies or guys as well, like, reaching out to you, or at least, like, saying, oh, you're such an inspiration, you do so much, you do so well. And, like, I'm sure, you have those people reaching out to you, like, asking for advice. How do you manage that? And do you feel it as like a big sense of responsibility added on to everything else that you have?
Actually, yes, I do. And I'm always there to, a lot of the time it is advice on how do you do this, or how did you achieve that. And I think what the danger of social media, although it's a great way to connect with people, they're seeing the end result. They're not seeing the journey to get there, and so they're all on their own journey as well. And it's hard, and things don't always go well. And so social media has that, unfortunately, that side of it where everything seems quite perfect, and so being able to, I guess, somehow kind of communicate that we all deal with the same issues. Really, we all deal with issues relating to, relationships and conflict, and how to eat well, and I don't know, all these little details and big details in our lives. And so so I try to tell them that it's, that you're on your own journey, and don't get fooled into thinking that things on social media are necessarily the whole story, because it never is. So I'd love to bring that element. That's why I love things, even like Instagram story, for example, because it's much more real. It's much more in the moment, as opposed to glossy pictures and highly, edited photos that people see on Instagram. I worry for my daughter sometimes about a false sense of how things should be based on, pictures that she might see one day. She's only 8, so she doesn't have Instagram yet, but I'm sure it won't be too long.
Yeah, how far away.
Yeah, so how things should be versus how things are.
And Alex, do you have like a strategy with that, or is that kind of just organically happened, or is that something that you actually pushing a little bit and encourage within yourself and your own sort of business strategies?
Yeah, it was something that I wanted. I knew that I wanted this several years ago. I wanted to be able to get a message out there, and that was really in terms of educating people about what emergency was really, because I think most people's first experience with emergency vet hospitals is when they come in with their pet and they really don't have any understanding in that situation about exactly what's going on. And so being able to educate people before they ever get in that situation, that was really the catalyst of why I started the social media profile. The personal aspect of it has just kind of come as it does about from people wanting to know a little bit more about what you do and things like that. But it was always about showing people, bringing people behind the doors of an emergency hospital so they could see the stories of the patients that come through the door, and to just, that was really where it came about. So there was a certain degree of, I suppose, strategy you would call it about it, but where it's ended up now is much more a personal story, really, which is probably the right thing for it to be, because that's what people want to know is about the people that make it happen, including myself.
Totally.
Awesome. So I guess we've had you on the line for like 2 hours, and also like the time before. So, before we finish off with I guess, and it's been such a fantastic chat. Honestly, like, as we've been talking, I've like literally been like in my mind writing out these questions, and I think we're going to have to at some point in the future hopefully get you on again, just to kind of go through all those things, because it's been so fascinating talking to you. But before we get on to the finish, like, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you or to follow you? You know, and you obviously have your website, Instagram, Facebook, etc.
Yeah, I do a lot of my followers I chat with on Facebook, and less Instagram as well, but generally Facebook, because most of my content on Facebook is vet related, and so a lot of people have questions relating to their pet, or what should I do in this situation, or from an educational point of view. So yeah, Facebook, and it's interesting. It's sort of a different group of people who follow me on Instagram, and they're more people perhaps in a younger female age group who are, some of them are aspiring vets who one day would love to be doing the kind of work that I do. And so being able to, sometimes they say, I've had a really, vet students, I've had a really tough day, how do you, and being able to just talk to them and encourage them to keep working, that they'll get there in the end. So yeah, just two different sets of people really. Facebook is more about the pet owners, the pet lovers, and Instagram's a little bit more about people who would like to become vets one day. So. And
don't forget television.
Yeah. Hopefully that'll be the. Actually, you guys hadn't brought that up, and I was like, what if we're going to talk about that? But yeah, very very excited. Hopefully next year we're going to start filming for the new episode of our series of Bondi Vet, and that to me was really a dream come true, to be selected as one of the new faces of the Bondi Vet team. As I was saying to Gareth before, my dream was to be able to bring people behind the doors of an emergency hospital, and this will really be able to be the ultimate way to fulfill on that, because we'll be able to share those stories. And so that is something that I'm incredibly excited about, and I love that we're in a team of 4. We all have our different areas, and veterinary medicine is so varied. And we've got Pete over in Western Australia in the zoo, treating all sorts of weird and wonderful creatures, and he's just the most chilled out, relaxed kind of guy. We've got the new graduate Danny, and then also Lewis, who is in New South Wales. So just the variety, and I think all the stories that we have to tell will be fantastic. So I'm so excited about that.
That's weird. First of all, congratulations. I mean, that was quite a big, rigorous selection process, so well done on that. But so they'll literally be walking around your hospital like with cameras, and you'll just be doing normal. Wow, it's incredible.
Yeah, no, and the great thing about it is they've done it for the last 10 years. So because they've worked with Dr. Chris Brown down in SASH, which is the big specialist hospital down in Sydney. And so the fantastic thing about the filming that we've done so far is I really got a chance to see, what these guys know, when to stand back and get out of the way. They know how a vet hospital runs. They also know, about making sure that at the end of the day that the patient, there's no compromise to the patients that get in the way of, if we're filming, for example, that the patients will always come first, and also being able to talk to the pet owners and talk about what those pets mean to them as well. That was one of the most, it was a really special moment to watch how those pet owners really told the story of how much that pet meant to them. So, I'll literally be doing my job, which is awesome, and having a film crew follow me around and then talking about what we're doing. So I really couldn't ask for more. It's just it's like the ultimate thing that every vet would love to be able to do. So I feel incredibly privileged to be in that position.
And there's one other aspect that I was thinking of even earlier, actually, when you were discussing it right at the beginning, was you might actually have that follow-up. Now, I would imagine with those kind of shows, I would imagine they have the odd follow-up story.
It's to see what. Yeah, absolutely. It's we will do, and
which is kind of cool.
Which would be fantastic, because actually that's one thing that we discussed with the producers. It's really is an essential part of it to see what the outcome was at the end of the day, and so I'll have the something that I've never really been able to do that much before, which is following those patients back to health, back home, seeing them at home, meeting those pet owners down the track, and hearing about their journey. And yeah, that it's funny when you bring that up. That just makes me so excited. So
Yeah,
yeah.
so cool.
Yeah, you can see it in your face, just like, whoa, cool.
Yeah, no, I can't wait to get going. I mean, look, there'll be challenges. It's like starting a whole new career. It really is, in terms of knowing, what goes along with being in the public eye and filming and all that sort of thing. But I'm definitely always up for a challenge, and just very excited to see what that future will bring. Different directions.
We're excited too. Yeah, we're super excited. You're definitely a lady on a mission, and yeah, we just know, just by chatting to you and seeing what you've done, that the future will hold awesome stuff, and we just can't wait to see how that all unfolds, and we'll just definitely be following you, and we're just so grateful for your time tonight. So thank you so much, Alex. It was really, really great chatting.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's as I said, the time has just flown by. It's been fantastic. So thanks for having me on the show, guys. Really great.
Yeah, no, and just to sort of say thanks as well, Alex. Like it's been really like interesting talking to you, and also it's just so nice seeing how normal you are. You know what I mean? You're like you definitely are like ridiculously human. And you really paint a great picture for everybody. You're definitely a leader, and someone for ladies to look up to, and I'm sure that you're a big source of inspiration for them. But not just ladies, guys as well, in everybody. And what you do is really great. Thank you for being so nice, so smiley. So interesting, and we really look forward to launching this episode, because it's really been extremely valuable, and we wish you all the best. We will make sure that everyone follows you and keeps track and eggs you on and everything like that. So and wishing you a really good Christmas, and good luck with Boxing Day and New Year's Day in the emergency ward.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, thank you so much. And yeah, I really look forward to kind of sharing those stories from this Christmas, and who knows, next time I might have some new stories for you. So yeah, but no, thank you very much. It's been a privilege to have you to be on the show. So
cool. Well, thank you.
Awesome. Well, that's cool. So we can.
How's things going?
Yes, that was Kif, bud.
Yes, that was cool. That was such a great chat, bud. Really awesome. Man.
Yeah, but I was flipping Kif. I really enjoyed that chat.
Yeah,
Alex was awesome, bud. She was flipping great.
But she was so
what a Kif
good.
chick, eh?
Yeah. Really cool. Yes, I don't know how she does everything.
But it's just so flipping cool, because she's so nice as well.
Yeah.
Just a nice flipping person, and a nice, what a flipping well-rounded individual.
Yes, but really, really awesome, man. Wow, I feel so lucky that we got to chat to her,
Yeah, but me too, hey, flipping so Kif, eh?
Yeah. But this is what I find with a lot of chats. I don't know about you, but like we'll be talking and I'll be like, oh my God, I got to ask this next. And then they carry on talking, and then it goes to something else, and you're like, oh, this is not the right moment for that. But then another good one comes, and then you're like, I mustn't forget the other one. Yeah. And then they just start stacking up. You know what I mean?
And it happens all the time. And then I think, okay, and then you might ask one in a different way that I was thinking of asking a similar question. I'm like, fuck it, that one's gone. No,
yeah, I'm the same. There was a couple like that today. I was like, oh, damn it, you got it.
It's classic, man. But that's Kif, because we just have to be on our toes. It's teaching us to think and listen.
Yes, listen, bad. Yeah. Yes, link importance here.